this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. This could turn out to be a very messy kitchen time. I really ought to do this outside. But this Cymbidium was potted around the end of March 2016. It's been in there a while. So what we're going to find in this pot, I haven't got a clue. We could have a pot so full of roots it's just jam-packed. We could have hardly any and they're all rotten. All sorts of things we could find in here, including some wildlife possibly. Who knows? As I said, well, the roots have grown onto the steak, that's for sure. Right. Now, are you going to come? Actually, we'll take the flower spike off first. All the blooms have gone now; they're all closing, so that's had its day, so to speak. So we'll dispose of that out of the way. Otherwise, I'm only going to knock things around. Now, this, when I got it, was in a very poor state. It had a lot of bulbs, but they were all like this, you know, dead. Now these aren't really dead, they're solid, they're rock solid. If those were separated and sat, and all this dead material taken off back to the bulb so you could see it, and sat on some moss, they may well shoot out and root and grow new plants. But I can't be bothered, and I don't want any more Cymbidiums. One is more than I really want in the first place. But anyway, it grew that, and then it grew this one. That one had 2 spikes. This one I believe only had 1. And then last year, during the growing season, it grew this one, which is bigger than anything it's had before, and we had 2 spikes. So it's been progressing, but what I'd really like to see is 2 new growths instead of 1 each time. The only way that's going to happen is that there's strength in the plant, and the strength is slowly but surely building up year by year. This may be the season where it decides to push out 2. There is a thing with Cymbidium roots, they actually quite enjoy being hacked. They branch like hell, and it seems to stimulate root growth. Is this going to come out? Loosened a bit. Right, now you're going to come out. I've got a feeling this is just going to take a long time. Oh no, that's come out. Oh, jolly good. Right, firstly, oh, it smells a bit mushroomy. Now let's see what we got. Oh. Well, we have got a lot of roots, and we have got some roots growing, so there are some growing tips. Whether they'll still be there after I've because what tends to happen is they tend to move to the edge of the pot and then wrap themselves round and tangle and branch, and you end up with a solid mass around the outside and not necessarily many on the inside. So it's like hollow, but in the middle will be old stale media, and that's got to come out. And I've always found that when plants get like this, the easiest way to get the media out is to come up through the middle. And what have we got in here? We've got some pretty large pieces of bark. Whether they were just selected and put in the bottom, I just can't remember. And I'm not going back and watching the video. I think I did film the original potting up this one. Be a very old video, won't it? 2016. Now what I'd like to be able to do is tease this away from the inside and not actually touch these roots very much. Just peel all the media away from the inside and leave it hollow right up to the top. That's my theory. Now, it might not work, but if I can do that, then I'm not really disturbing the roots. And if I have to leave an odd piece of old media still attached up inside here, then I don't care, quite honestly. I'd rather disturb them as little as possible on the grounds that although others say, some say, that they like their roots being disturbed and, you know, they enjoy a repot and the roots branch and all that, I don't know. That's only what others say. I haven't got the experience with these things. I've only got one, so this is the second time I've ever repotted a Cymbidium, and it's the same plant. So I haven't exactly got a lot of experience with these. You don't necessarily need a lot, simply on the grounds I have no intentions of getting any more. I mean, there are some nice miniatures, but at the end of the day, there's the bottom of a steak. I was just going to say, that was a woody root. That's the base of a steak. But this is coming apart a lot easier than I was expecting. A lot easier. And I'm actually at the base of the plant now. And it's all coming down through the inside. And although it's a little bit mushroomy, it's not bad. Bad at all. And I'm quite happy that this has been a pretty happy root system in its pot, just by the sheer amount that they've grown. So I don't plan on changing much. I mean, this went in, is that perlite? Yes, yeah, if it crumbles that easy. So this went in a mix of types of bark with some quite large pieces and some smaller stuff and perlite. And that's all that went in there, and it's been a happy root system, and still is to a degree. Now it's a matter of how much of the old plant do I take off. With the old plant we will say bye-bye to some roots. I'm definitely going to take these two small ones off. They serve no real purpose. They're going to break off nicely. Yeah. No, I'm not going to plant them. It's another large pot to have lying around. But what I will do is trim that a bit neater, because that's a bit of a tear rather than a cut. So we'll just cut that nicely, and then we'll get some cinnamon on that, as well as where that spike came off. We'll do that too. There we go, that's a lot neater. Right, now how are we doing here? No, I'm not going to do a lot of trimming here. I'm going to do some. I wonder if Cymbidiums can shoot out of old bulbs given half a chance. Taking the old sheaths off because it's places for things to hide. And even though this is not going to be too much longer in the grow room, it will eventually go back outside, probably middle of May, something like that. I need frost-free nights. The cold nights don't matter, but I need it frost-free. So I could probably get away with going out second week in May, something like that. I can go outside and then just keep my eye on the weather forecasts. And if there's an overnight frost threatened, then it'll have to come back in. I'll go back out again when the threat's over. It's not too much of a big deal, quite honestly. Right, I don't think I'm going to get much more out. There's a nice hollow on the inside, and this is where, excuse me, a lot of dead roots are. So we'll start hacking. This is where we put the theory to a test. Does it really enjoy having its roots hacked? And does it branch? And does it produce a nice new root system once this has been done? Trouble is to find out, I'd have to take it out of the pot again, wouldn't I? Which I'm not going to do. But a lot of these roots are good. Quite pleased. But I want to trim it anyway, simply because I've got to get it in another pot. And it's probably going to go in a pot exactly the same size, quite honestly. I see no point in reducing the pot size, as the plant is expected to get bigger, not smaller. I know I've taken 2 bulbs off the back, but They weren't up to much anyway. That one's gone. What I ought to be looking at is where the roots are coming from, and if they're coming from this back bulb, then they're probably dead. It will save doing a lot of checking. Just take the back roots off. A solid lump of bark there. Make room for new roots. Right, how are we doing? That's a manky one. As is that. As is that. Getting there. Right, now what's happening here? Some ends to trim. Some of these are quite papery. The trouble is I haven't got enough ancient experience of doing this many times to actually know how far a root has to be gone before it's declared dead, if you know what I mean. I mean, that's a good root, that's nice and fleshy, I can tell the difference with that. Yeah, that does feel very soggy, that one, down to there. These are all entangled here. That one in the middle's gone. And that one. One, and that one's quite firm, just the end was gone. Right, it's coming around here now. Now this is where I've got quite a few signs of live roots growing. This is where I don't want to do much trimming, because I do actually have white root tips in this area, so I'm not going to do much at all. In fact, I'm probably going to do nothing at all. Right, there we go. That'll do. The odd piece of media that's still stuck in there is not enough to worry about, even though it is quite old. I've got the majority of it out. That's soggy root. Another one. Right, that's going to do then. Now, I don't know, if you look at, that was 2 years ago, that was last year. That was 2 years ago, and obviously the new growth came right out of the side, and nothing came out that side, so we just had one new growth. So, on this one, the new growth could come out almost anywhere, quite honestly, I don't know. But if it's only going to have a single growth, it's unlikely to come out round the back, so it's more likely to come out round here somewhere. And it would be nice if there was two, but I doubt if there will be. But what we'll do is we'll get as many of these sheaths off as possible, so that that bulb is clean. Who knows, it might even shoot out from the older bulb. You never know. But I want these sheaths off. They are next autumn's hidey places. Not this year's. The next time I bring this back in, that's going to be the hidey places. It's these sheaths that get left on now. So we'll clean it up reasonably well. Right. Now I'm going to give the whole thing, from the base of the leaves downwards, a spray with hydrogen peroxide to make sure there are no little snails or anything left lurking in there. See, they could have quite happily have lived through the whole winter in this pot. and never ventured out, but they're still in there. So as a precaution, rather than pop them up, let's get rid of them. So yeah, I'll give it a good spray, get rid of the rubbish, and then I'll be back and we'll look at what I'm actually going to pot it in, which I haven't made up my mind yet. So I'll be back. Okay, I've decided that the fact that that wasn't a bad root system and the plant seems to have done okay, why change anything? So although that is the same size pot, it's just a new one. Saved me washing that one now. And I got sidetracked, started another job, started yet a third job, went back and finished off the second job. The other one's still outstanding, and now I've come back to this, which was the first job. So my light's going now, so be it. Right, so I'm starting off with the top layer on here, which was contrived because this is going to be a mix of medium and small bark, but the top layer was just medium, unmixed. Now what I'll do is tip the rest in here and mix it. It'll all go in. It doesn't matter if it's not perfectly mixed, but obviously from now on the rest of the pot is liable to be where the roots will be, although they will get right down to the bottom of the pot. But I don't want the mix too tight. I mean, there are some Cymbidiums that are actually terrestrials and do genuinely grow in the ground, but most of the hybrids you get will have come from the epiphyte representatives in their dim and distant history. I suppose in theory they could be a mixture of both, but either way it's accepted that most Cymbidiums like some air around their roots, but don't like it too airy that their roots dry fast. Yeah, they do like to hold their moisture. So right, we'll get some of this stuff in. This is endearingly called sponge rock, but what it effectively is giant perlite, and in some cases ridiculously big perlite. It does break up very easily. Whenever you play with this stuff, don't breathe the dust in. Try to avoid the dust at all costs. On this stuff, near the surface of the bag, I'll show you what it's like deeper in the bag. That's dust. That will get into the air. But the dust near the top of the bag is what I call heavy dust, and it drops. It drops downwards. It doesn't float into the air and float upwards. So you're relatively safe handling it gently. Not juggling with it or doing anything silly and getting it up in the air, but if you keep it low down and handle it gently, it will sink. And any dust that's created is more like, it's not really dust, it's tiny bits. So it drops. It doesn't get into the air. If it doesn't get into the air, you're not breathing it in, basically. To be safe, you should wear a mask, really. They're rather difficult to get hold of at the moment, for one reason or another. I've heard that there are some dentists, which obviously if you go for dental treatment, there's two of the blighters in the room, isn't there? There's always an assistant. They are both obliged to wear masks, and they're running out. So some of them are having to cancel appointments because they haven't got the required safety equipment. That's good, isn't it? Well, if you were dreading going to the dentist, it might be good, but otherwise it's not. Right. Now that took about half. So we'll mix up a bit more before I put the plant in. I'm trying to judge this. Get a bit more of this stuff in. Mix that in. Right, now we can look at putting the plant in. It now hasn't got a huge root system, but what it has got is the ability to generate one. So I want that sitting on top of that media with the bulbs at a reasonable height. It actually worked quite well. The roots have gone in and sat nicely, and the bulbs are at a height I'm happy with. Now all we've got to do, I'm trying to sit the plant as far back as I can go, simply because I doubt if it's going to shoot out backwards. It's highly likely to shoot forward, and given the length of time it stayed in its pot last time, I'm anticipating the same thing happening again. So I don't expect this to come out of its pot for a long time. So it needs room. So the latest bulbs, where the new growths are going to come from, need to be back against the edge of the pot, leaving lots of room at the front of the plant for new growths to grow and expand. That way it can stay in the pot. If I dumped it in the middle of the pot, the new growths would run out of room relatively quickly, and as a consequence would get to the edge of the pot a lot sooner. And then you end up repotting when you don't really need, you wouldn't have needed to if you sat the plant at a suitable distance from the edge of the pot. So I know I've got some hollows in here, so I'm just trying to wiggle some stuff downwards into the hollows. Don't want huge air gaps. The odd one I suppose won't hurt, but it would be better if they weren't there. This is nearly done now. I obviously don't want to bury the pseudo bulbs. They need to be just a fraction below the surface, just the very, very base, nothing more. And if in doubt, sit them on the media and don't put them in the media at all. This is going to go out in a situation where if we get 2 weeks of rain, it's going to be sat in 2 weeks of rain, yeah? At which point the media will be absolutely wringing wet. So if the bulbs are buried in it, so will they be wringing wet, which is not ideal. I'm just pushing down the sides now. Make sure it's well and truly firmly in. Just checking the depth. Make sure we haven't gone too deep. I reckon that's about right. They're just sat on the surface. Hang on, let's see if I can get over here a bit. You can see there. You see, the level of the base is just sitting on the surface. It could go a little bit deeper, but I see no point. Yeah, the roots are going to come out and go straight in the media. That doesn't matter. And if I see a lot of bare roots around the base, I can always top it up a bit. I'd rather have them sitting on the top than buried. And I think that will be fine. I'm just going to actually add a tiny little bit more around the latest pseudo bulb, because there is a gap. And I'd like the roots to go straight into something, so just a little bit more around the surface. There's still plenty of air around the base. Right, dusty mitts. Right, so that's it. Now that needs a really good soak, and I will need to return to it quite frequently to give it subsequent soaks, because the new Orchiata bark dries incredibly quickly. Now the chances are that under normal circumstances, when a Cymbidium like this loses its spikes, eventually that's going to trigger the new growths, yeah? But I don't know how long the gap's going to be, and at the moment I haven't got a hugely active root system. So I don't want it staying soaking wet, but then I don't want it absolutely bone dry for any length of time, or the roots that I have got will dehydrate. So I've got to keep my eye on this now, and this will need careful watering, yeah? And a lot of it will be based on this. How heavy are you? That's why I'm doing this now. And I will memorise that as best I can, that's what it weighs when it's bone dry. And then I'll feel it again when it's absolutely dripping wet. And then obviously I've got everything in between stored up here somewhere. I don't know if there's room, perhaps there's no room to store it up there and I'll get it all wrong, but we shall see. God, it's nearly tea time again. Actually looking forward to my tea tonight. Had a very early lunch today. Right, so that's it, one Cymbidium Repot. There's nothing really odd about that. That could almost have been any orchid. It's nothing special really. Now I know some people start adding things like peat into their mix to get a much more earthy type mix. That works, you can do that if you want. I've just got the problem that I'm not in control of watering during the summer months, except for when it's dry out there and we haven't had any rain, in which case I'm in charge. But under normal circumstances it's the weather that keeps this watered, and in the UK we do tend to get a bit of the aforementioned weather, so I don't want it staying soggy, so I've avoided the earthy type mix, you know, with peaty type things and stuff like that in it. I've stuck with stuff that's got air in it, and it's up to me to keep the plant hydrated if the weather doesn't do it for me during the summer months. Right, come on then, sort out some new growths. Let's be having you. No point in having you if you don't grow. Thanks for dropping by. See you next time.